I'm a special advisor to the South African Gun Owners Association. Really just a few observations. Mr. Lamb, I think you're 100% correct that we need to take an evidence and data-driven approach. I also believe it's quite dangerous to extrapolate information from US studies to the South African environment. We are very different societies with very different issues that we are trying to grapple with. One of the things that has concerned me, and one of the gaping holes in the data, is that we have no studies. I could not find a single study done on the self-defense uses of firearms in South Africa. Yet we have Section 13 that permits licensing in that context. We need to understand to what extent these firearms are successfully used in self-defenses or not, and to balance that against the overall issues that we need to consider. We also need to get a better idea of the sources of illegal firearms. I have seen studies, and I have read a number of your studies as well, and I've seen indications and estimates of anything between 500,000 and 6 million, depending upon who is doing the estimating. I looked at your study under the gun, and looked at the net civilian losses, after what had been recovered from the police. And using a sort of back of the cigarette box calculation, it seemed to me that it would take anything between 150 and 1,000 years for civilian losses to make up the total number of estimated illegal firearms. In which case we have a much bigger problem than simply civilian losses, and we need to understand that in order to be able to tackle it, bearing in mind that we also live in a country with very porous borders. The other factor is, of course, that many people are under the impression that firearms are difficult to manufacture. It's not necessarily true. We know from some police reports that have appeared in the media that problems are being experienced with firearms being manufactured in the Western Cape now illegally. So there are really, I think, a number of things we need to do. One is we need to consider the competency processes and whether those are being adequately implemented, and whether we're sorting out the wheat from the chaff. We as gun owners are anecdotally aware of the fact that in many instances the background checks are not being properly done, or not being done at all. It's a significant concern to us. We are totally opposed to illegal firearm ownership, and we're totally opposed to a system where background checks are not adequately done and people who should not have firearms become possessed of those. That's a significant concern to us. The only other point that I think is perhaps worth making is that it's not so much the number of firearms as who is in possession of them, which ties back to the competency issue. And finally, we need to bear in mind that, as the Secretary indicated, firearms are only a part of the problem. According to the Statistics South Africa data, for the last 10 years at least, for every assault-related death that occurs with a firearm, more than 50 people have been murdered with sharp objects. And so we have less of a firearm crisis than a social crisis, quite frankly, although firearms are part of it, and we obviously do need an appropriate framework. Thank you very much.
Can I thank the four contributors?